Hey, I'm Ben Silverio.
I'm BJ Colangelo.
And I'm Ansel Burch.
And it's
Time to
party.
Pew, 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 pew. We're not doctors. We don't give medical advice. Please drink responsibly. Today's episode was recorded on October 21st, 2024. Guys, I'm so excited to hear your stories with this movie. Because I will be honest with you, I watched it for the first time yesterday.
Ansel.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my,
totally
what a
missed it.
gift we gave you.
Wow. Oh
Truly,
my gosh.
it was lovely. I'm honored.
This is great. Oh my gosh. I had no idea this was your first time watching it.
Remember, I grew up in Ohio, which is like 20 years in the past.
It's very true.
I missed all the good stuff.
Oh man. Party people, welcome back to Time to Party, where everything is made up, the points don't matter, and you know, we're all here for a good time, right?
Yeah!
Yeah!
Finger guns!
Finger guns all day. We, as usual, have a very special guest with us this month to talk about the movie that we will be, you know, spotlighting. But as I said in the first episode, this is our first guest host that I was a fan of before becoming friends with and then having on the show. This person is an incredible writer, is an incredible podcaster, also an incredible singer. You should totally listen to her sing in her old theater clips on her social media because they're A+. Yes, this month to talk about Pleasantville, we have the teen queen herself, BJ Colangelo.
Hiya.
Yes.
Ooh, that was lovely.
So lovely. And it is so lovely to have BJ here this month as we talk about the 1998 classic Pleasantville. Now, if you are like Ansel and didn't know about Pleasantville for a while, first, sorry. But second, our good friends at Rotten Tomatoes have this to say about the movie. Impressed by high school student David's devotion to a 1950s family TV show, a mysterious television repairman provides him with the means to escape into the black and white program with his sister Jennifer. While David initially takes to the simplistic, corny world of the show, Jennifer sets about jolting the characters with doses of reality that unexpectedly bring a little color to their drab existence. Very in-depth.
Yeah, that about covers it.
Mm-hmm.
That is what happens. As we do here on Time to Party, the second episode of the month, we get into our review of the month's movie, and there is so much to say about Pleasantville. BJ, what was your first memory of this movie?
So I love Pleasantville, and this is a movie that I have carried with me for a very long time. But I'm pretty sure the first time that I watched it was actually in school. I think this is a like your teacher's on maternity leave sort of situation. We're going to watch a movie. And I want to say it was for like social studies class, which sort of makes sense. I mean, it still is not. But we also watched Bill and Ted in that class as well. So, you know, we public school, we love it. So I saw this movie and I thought that it was beautiful to look at because it is. I think that it is one of the most gorgeous films to look at. But the older I get, the more this movie evolves in how I feel about it because my understanding of the themes change because as you get older, you learn more and you understand more. And then the wordplay in this gets a little bit more clever. There's, you know, the obvious, very heavy handed stuff, but then there's also some really subtle stuff that's going on here that you don't quite notice when you're a teenager. But this is a movie that I return to probably like like once a year because it just does something for me. It also has one of my favorite covers of Across the Universe, the Fiona Apple cover in it. I think it's just gorgeous, and that's always going to make me happy. But sometimes it's really nice to just live in a world where you can be a teenager and have big feelings about how to change things and make things better, and those feelings can actually enact change, because that's not how the real world works, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Ugh.
Who? Ansel, as someone who came to this as an adult, how do you think your younger self would have reacted to this?
That's a very good question. I think about where I was in 1998, and I think I really would have appreciated this movie. I remember 1998 as a big year of sort of awakening for me in reality. That was the year that I got to go to like Model UN. I know, exciting. And that was the year that I think was my first year at band camp.
Ooh.
Also very exciting. Hold on to your butts. I know. But like, I remember that year. I remember 1998 being the year that I was exposed to like Peaches by what was it, the American Presidents of the
United
United
States.
States
Yeah.
of America.
Yeah. And
Yep.
like a bunch of the music that was happening. And again, I grew up in a place that was effectively 20 years in the past. So like going out to a place where there were other kids my age and staying in a hotel for a while, even though it was the dorkiest thing I could have done, it was very, I had my own like reverse Pleasantville going on in 1998. So I think this movie would have really hit the spot at the time.
Yeah, that's kind of how it went for me at the
really?
time, because it did really hit the spot for me, because like, living in a predominantly white area of Philadelphia, going to a Catholic school without being Catholic, there was a number of things that made me othered in my community. And so, also I was obsessed with Nick at Night shows. So like the older black and white kind of stuff, like I was drawn to, And so to see this movie where one of the main characters who loves this sort of thing gets brought into the world, like appealed to me, I mean, I guess I never really grew out of escapism, right? I kind of built a career on it, I guess.
Escaping into nostalgia? No, I don't know her.
No, couldn't be me. But yeah, like BJ was saying, also drawn to it visually, because like, what else was doing this at the time other than, the Wizard of Oz, right? Like, it was just such oh my God, a dynamic, like visual style, but also another thing that I'll go back to is one of the things I remember from screenwriting class was my professor on the first day said, very matter-of-factly, assume that your audience is stupid. And at the time we laughed, but it's just like, no, what he meant was like, show, don't tell, but also show in a way that you can't be misunderstood. And I feel like Pleasantville is a great example of that, where, yeah, you really get what they're trying to say here, unless you're really actively rallying against it, I guess. But yeah, but the first thing I'd like to talk about with Pleasantville is that I think some of our listeners may not agree that it fits our theme. Because, does Pleasantville count as a time travel movie if they're technically traveling into a TV show rather than 1950 itself?
Mm-hmm.
BJ, how do you feel about that?
So when you asked me to be in the show, this is one of the movies that I really wanted to fight for, because this to me is a time travel movie. Because when we think about even something like Back to the Future, of going back into, the 50s or what have you, movies are going back to an idealized time period. They are going back to a time period that people have absorbed by osmosis. When people are talking about, like, oh my God, I love the 80s aesthetic of Stranger Things, you like the aesthetic of it being the 1980s. You don't actually care if it is accurate to the 80s. It's incredibly anachronistic and nobody cares. And so I like that Pleasantville, because it is like a magic 1950s TV show, it is transporting people to an idealized version of a decade that honestly did not exist, but we like to pretend that it does. When Donald Trump says, make America great again, this is what he's talking about. He's talking about this fake fantasy version of the 1950s, the same way that Ronald Reagan was talking about this fake fantasy version of the 1950s. And so I do consider it a time travel movie, because although they are going into a TV series, they are also going into this time period where people want, like, the people in the culture wanted history to remember the 50s looking like this. This is why we started getting things like mental hygiene films in this time period, which Pleasantville very much feels like a result of mental hygiene films. Same thing with Leave It to Beaver or the Andy Griffith Show.
Mm-hmm.
It was this curated version of what they wanted America to look like. And that includes leaving out people of color. It includes leaving out poverty, leaving out gay people, leaving out the disabled, leaving out everything. And so I think that it's a fascinating movie to study, because ultimately, when we think about any movie where people are going back to the 1950s, this is where they're going.
Oh, I could not have said
Great.
it
Yeah.
any better myself, because I agree 100% with you. Totally. And that I also agree that it definitely fits within our realm of coverage, because of that reason. That's totally right. And I was going to wait to get into the Trump stuff. And I think I'm going to wait just a tiny bit longer, because I thought of another thing while thinking of the first question. What happened to the real Bud and Mary Sue? Is this a quantum leap situation? Did they just jump into their bodies and take their places? Have they been? I don't know. I was thinking about Bud and Mary Sue when the credits were rolling, and I'm just like, what happened to those crazy kids?
I mean, they must have quantum leaped because everyone recognized them.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's operating by like quantum leap, or even I would say like Are You Afraid of the Dark rules, where kids all the time are being transported into like other dimensions or other things, and they look identical, but everyone else is like, you're clearly this person. So I think that's what's going on.
And then, the way that time in the real world moves versus time in Pleasantville, how long do you think Jen and David were actually in Pleasantville? Because, at the end, Don Knotts, I believe, mentions that it was no, there was a commercial about the marathon, and they mentioned that it's been an hour that
Yep.
they've been gone. But
Yep.
by the end of the movie, Mary Sue goes off to college. So it's like, it's not going to be as long as Groundhog Day, but like they were in there for a long time.
Don Knotts said at the beginning of the movie that he was going to give them a week. And that feels accurate. It feels like they got about a week in there before he escapes. Obviously, it's longer before she goes off to college and so on. But
Yeah, I think within the world of Pleasantville, it's a week. I think in our world, it's the length of a very special episode, which tends to be a little bit longer than your average episode. So that's how I think in our world, that's how long they've been gone. Enough for that episode to play out on TV of them changing the whole show.
Yeah. Because I recently found out about the answer to the question, how long was Bill Murray in Groundhog Day? and they said it was based in, I think Harold Ramis said it was like based on the Buddhist idea of like how long it takes to purify a soul. And it was something like thousands of years. And I'm just like, Bill Murray was stuck in that fucking town for thousands of years. And then when I
That's
think about it,
wild.
like, yeah, that kind of makes sense after everything that he did.
Mm-hmm.
But like, we're definitely not dealing with that level of existentialism here
Yeah.
in Pleasantville,
Well,
right?
we're also not in a time loop, so
That's
that
true.
helps a great deal.
Yeah,
Mhm.
very much so.
But now that we got those questions out of the way, I
will throw out, and just because we haven't mentioned it, this is a tiny technicality. The show was filmed in the past. This is a classic show. So even notwithstanding the fact that it's a period piece or whatever else might be happening, the show was filmed in the past. All of the characters in the show, all the actors in the show would have aged a great deal and possibly even passed on by the time these kids are watching it. So it is time travel,
right.
in more than one regard.
That's very true. They literally traveled to a time in the past that's depicting a time further in the past. So yeah, no, that holds up.
Yeah.
Granted,
they traveled to the fictionalized version, but that's neither here nor there.
Right. But we do need to go back to that whole fictionalized version of it, because it may be hard to dispute the greatness of Pleasantville, but it really hit me differently this time around in two ways. So the first way was covered when BJ and Harmony talked about it back in 2021 on This Ends a Prom. In your episode, you and Harmony made the comparison to Trump and his supporters. And now that we're on the cusp of another election involving them, those comparisons are clearly at the forefront again. So how does it feel to be back at this point having this discussion again, BJ?
It's weirdly poetic. I would call it beautiful, but it's terrifying, so it can't be beautiful. But so much of Pleasantville is a story about how things are so different and yet they're exactly the same. And it feels very strange to be having this conversation again. And Trump still being a thing, and this Make America Great Again idea still being a thing, and if anything, worse than it was in 2021 when we had this conversation the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And it like kind of in a very strange way feels very appropriate to be talking about this movie again because of its themes and because of this idea of going back and realizing like the problems that teenagers have and the problems that society have, they kind of never change. They just shift their shape a little bit.
During this rewatch, when they were talking about the Pleasantville Code of Conduct, it was just giving Project 2025 to me. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, this is ridiculous. Big Bob sucks.
Big Bob does suck, yes. That is his job.
What's the line about the bowling alley?
We're safe now. We're in the bowling alley. Was that the one you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Or nothing can get us here. We're in a bowling alley. I don't remember what the exact line was.
Oh, man. But it's just like the fact that we're back here again is just so frustrating, but it also highlights why we need movies like Pleasantville. We in the first episode I did call the metaphors heavy-handed, but like you're not going to mistake what the metaphor is. The burning bush after the mom exhibits some self-love. Yeah, I think that one's pretty obvious.
And like the thing is too, as heavy-handed as they are, they're necessary because going back to the thing your screenwriting teacher told you, people are stupid. Like the amount of people who will hear someone like Trump say something so like insanely racist and just be like, well, that's not what he actually meant. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so then you watch a movie like Pleasantville where it is so over the top in its messaging, but it's necessarily so like it's honestly like I could make a through line between like the Pleasantville as a movie and like the Purge movies in terms of metaphorical heavy-handedness and people still walking up to the point, letting it hit them in the face and still not getting it. And so like I'm not as put off by it because also at the same time they're playing with 1950s television conventions which were super heavy-handed because they were borderline propaganda at that point.
Oh, yeah.
So it feels fitting to
It's true.
see them weaponize that technique in a way for good to make a good point.
Yes. And I mean, like, God, hearing them called the people who are colorful coloreds, like, how could you not get it after that?
Wow, that one was I was not ready. It was wild. I thought that the metaphor that spoke to me the most, and again, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, so like not to shit on small town Ohio too much, but like I knew these people. The willful desire to not have your viewpoint challenged and not gain new information is real. And I thought that it was really clever, going back to the fire situation. In order to get the firemen to respond, Tobey Maguire's character had to like stop telling them what the problem was and then think about what would actually get them to move. And I think that that's a metaphor that bears some consideration as we all move into this, you know, last few steps of the election cycle and then whatever happens afterward. You know, how can we communicate effectively to people who don't want, who don't see the fire as a problem and don't want to? What's the thing that gets them to move? It was just a really, like, maybe I overthought it, but that moment like really struck me.
No, that's real.
As
like,
a metaphor for this larger problem.
Yeah, that's such a great thing to point out because you're totally right. I fled the state of Ohio before I moved to Los Angeles. I was born and raised outside Chicago, then lived in Cleveland and a small town outside Cleveland, and then ended up here. And it's painful sometimes to try to explain to people that I've met in Los Angeles what it is like out there because they don't see it and they don't experience it. And so it breaks their brain a little bit to be like, no, you don't understand. You will have a conversation with somebody and explain to them, like, here's why racism is bad. Here's why transphobia is bad. But because it doesn't affect them in any way, shape, or form, they like are incapable of hearing it. And then people out here are like, but that seems so counterintuitive. And I'm like, I understand that, but you can't apply logic here because it does not exist. And that's sort of what you're dealing with in Pleasantville is a lot of these characters, you can't assume that they have the same common sense that the rest of us do because they straight up do not. They are incapable of understanding the world with the nuances that the rest of us are. They are literally programmed to understand things in black and white binary ways of thinking, and you have to literally deprogram them in order for them to see the colorful complications of life.
I mean, one of the characters is named Whitey.
And it's Whitey that starts the shit too.
Exactly.
Yes, he does.
Fucking Whitey. God. It's like, oh, it's just infuriating that like it's so true, right? Like that is such a mirror, you know, and like the best comedy is a mirror, right? And it really makes you think about the world you're living in. And so I think that's incredibly effective. Now David, is kind of what you want the audience to be by the end, right? Because like he learns empathy, and to get involved. Essentially, he kind of learns how to be a better ally, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that we start off with him wanting so badly to preserve Pleasantville, even knowing that it's all fake. And then we get to see his arc as it goes. It's not his movie by any stretch, but he does go on quite the journey.
Oh yeah, I love the comparison of him learning how to be a better ally because, you know, there's comfort in tradition, there's comfort in not challenging the status quo. There's, a sense of safety to that, especially for somebody like David and or Bud, who greatly is privileged by the status quo and is not harmed by it. He can comfortably coast. And so him learning the very rude awakening that I think happens to a lot of white people of, hey, if you're not fighting against this, you're also part of this problem, is a huge wake up call that he needed. And I've seen a lot of people who critique this movie, understandably so, for its lack of representation of anybody that is non-white. But I also don't think that Pleasantville very specifically is a movie that is trying to speak to white people to be better about their positionality in the world. If this was a movie, that was trying to be like ultra inclusive, then they would just straight up be talking down to black people. Like, black people don't need this movie to understand that racism is a problem and that white people are racist. They fucking know. But a lot of white people don't realize how complicit they are in a lot of these systems. And it takes a movie like this, where it takes people of color out of the equation completely, to go, do you see it now? Do you understand it now? And for that, I think it's very, very effective.
Incredibly, and I feel like back then as in the 90s, we had a lot more movies that would educate white people about these experiences that they would remain blind to for whatever reason. For example, when I was younger, I remember watching movies like The Birdcage and To Wong Fu that ultimately taught me more empathy and acceptance towards other people. What other movies do you think are essential viewing for people as they grow up, like Pleasantville or To Wong Fu?
Ooh, there's so many good ones. One that I always recommend to people is a teen girl movie, but it's the Amanda Bynes movie, Sydney White. And I like to call that Baby's First
Oh, yeah.
Socialism movie. It is essentially a Snow White retelling set on a college campus, but it is all about, learning how different cliques and different people all have value, and that putting people in social hierarchies is really dangerous, and how you need to like take care of each other and stop like letting the powerful rich capitalists run everything. And again, it's like a little hokey, a little heavy handed, but I think it gets the job done and is a great introduction for people into like political radicalism.
That's a great choice. Ansel, you got the gears turning there.
I do, man. That's a really great question, and
I
nothing
think
is coming to mind.
The thing that makes
aside from like Roots.
Oh well, for sure.
The ones that were like real on the nose about it. But yeah, To Wong Fu's great call.
Yeah, the thing about To Wong Fu that I think was the most effective was that you took 3 of the biggest movie stars at the time, right? And I mean, like, sure, John Leguizamo was like just coming up, but like Wesley Snipes and Patrick Swayze were like the guys,
and like male sex symbol, like these were the manliest guys you could get to do it.
And so for them to be in a story like that is just so important, which is why when people today are just like, oh, let's ban drag everywhere, let's, put all of these rules on trans people, it's just like, bro, where did this come from? We all saw this movie, right?
No.
No, but yeah, the answer is no. That's very true.
Well, and I think the other thing about that is like that was a time before we had a name for this.
Mm-hmm.
When you could make a movie like To Wong Fu, you could make a movie like Pleasantville, and it might slip under the radar of the worst of them, and get to some kids that needed to see this and needed to learn some empathy. And if I recall correctly, the marketing for this movie slipped it under the radar entirely. What it was about, they really leaned in on the like Leave It to Beaver-ness of it all.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much the like culture war of it all, and knowing, now that we have woke to be mad about, well, now the woke things are something that the right can like focus on. Whereas previously, where it was a bit more nebulous, we were able to get more stuff in, without it being clear to the people who wanted to fight against progress.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot on this Sunset Prom, this idea of the importance of coding and how everything now is trying so hard to be literal and leaving nothing up to the imagination. And that's actually becoming a bit of a detriment because now things are fitting in these very tight, meticulously labeled boxes. So it's hard for people outside of the boxes to see this as being for them in whatever way that may be. And that makes it really difficult for movies like this to get made, because I love the expression that the more specific something is, the more universal it feels. But usually when you have it that specific, they don't name it. It just is a specific thing that's happening. The story is very specific, and that then feels very universal, because what's happening in Pleasantville, I think the most obvious comparison to it is that this is a story about race. Like that is what it is. But you can also look at it as any ism that you want to put in the place of racism can fit and still fit in this story. Whereas I think if you were making Pleasantville today, it would be very heavy-handed to the point where it would be silver plattering it to people, and then it would name it. They would name it. They would call it like, this is racism or this is colorism or whatever you want to call it. And it's like, but once you do that, then also you have to go back, and a lot of things about this movie then have to change in order for it to make sense. And I don't know. I feel very mixed on, obviously canonical representation is incredibly important. I say this as a lesbian, I say this as a fat person, I say this as, somebody who is on a lot of different identity markers. Canonical representation is important, but I am more comfortable when something is not spelling out to me what I'm supposed to be taking away from it, or how I'm supposed to be, quote unquote, feeling seen in this moment. Because if you tell someone, oh, this is a story about a lesbian, and there's something about this character that I don't identify with, if there's something about this character that doesn't speak to me, then I feel like, oh, well, I guess I'm bad at being the lesbian because this isn't how I am. But if you just have a character that is coded, or a storyline that is coded, then a lot more people are able to be seen by the same movie and by the same situation. And that is an art form we are losing rapidly with algorithms right now.
Oh, it's a huge bummer, but luckily we still get things like Inside Out 2. There's always something to break through. I just love that movie. But also, I want Riley to be really good friends with her teammate.
Riley to have a deep dark secret that is actually a deep dark secret. Like, come on, Pixar, we see you.
God, we were so close. We're so damn close. I mean, Marvel's getting closer with Agatha, right?
Maybe.
We're testing the fences
I hope they're
here.
not just baiting it.
We really are.
Mhm.
But oh my god, I do got to say, as a longtime fan of the Young Avengers, I love what they're doing with Billy. Like,
That's right. It's the future now. We can assume everybody's seen it.
yeah. So it's just, oh man, they even got his like being Jewish is a big part of his identity, and so to make sure to include that in the MCU is really important. I'm sorry, tangent.
It's okay. I also appreciate how much cultural awareness they are bringing into their television shows, regardless of whether it was comfortable for all of the viewers,
Right.
which I think is good.
It's
but yes, tangent concluded.
it is very good to make your audience feel a little uncomfortable, because like if they're feeling a little uncomfortable, then they're paying attention.
Yeah, you're gonna learn something.
Right. I mean, fuck. Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, amazing.
God, just how uncomfortable was it to sit there the first time, but like just mind blown by the end, right? I was crying over rocks, BJ. Rocks.
Yeah.
You say that like I was
scene.
not also crying over rocks.
I mean, I would like us all to take a moment to remember the emotional connection we had to hot dog fingers.
Oh my God. I can't believe they made that so... God, Daniels are something else, man. Those guys.
So impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Love them. Guys, if you're ever listening to this podcast,
come on the
thank
show.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on the show, but also like thank you. A bit of a swerve right now. We did talk about David. We talked about Big Bob, who fucking sucks. We mentioned Skip Martin in the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to point out, Himbo Paul Walker was great.
Oh my God.
I wish we got more of Himbo Paul Walker.
I go back and forth on this because he feels like he was built in a lab to play this role. He is so good at playing this character. But I also think that if he had continued down this path, he would have been fighting with James Marsden for roles, and James Marsden would have beat him every time. So I guess good thing he, joined the family and got Fast and Furious with it. But he's so good in this movie, and the way that his eyes sparkle in the camera, he looks like a human Ken doll. Like, he's incredible in this role.
Sorry, Ryan Gosling. But keeping along the lines of Skip Martin, Lover's Lane, all the kids at Lover's Lane just casually 60-90 in cars with the tops down. You go, kids.
or whatever else they were doing.
Like, real bold.
Uh-huh. Hey, apparently once you are freed from the shackles, the rest of it goes as well. Actually, maybe this is a utopia. Maybe they don't understand to try and be shameful about it because they didn't know it existed previously.
Yeah, I mean,
can see
you
that.
can't
That could
you
totally
can't
fit.
shame the shameless.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. I don't
Their
know if
parents didn't know about sex.
That's true. Oh
The
my
bathrooms
God.
don't have
Another
toilets.
great scene.
Bathrooms don't have toilets. That was so good. That was so good.
Oh my gosh. Again, sorry, more tangents. But I mean, I guess this still applies, but like I've never liked the idea of hooking up in cars, because as a fat person, that sounds very uncomfortable. Like,
I'm led to understand that even skinny people are uncomfortable having sex in cars.
That's what I'm saying. There's so many weird like edges.
It sucks.
And cannot be that comfortable.
Let me just go
Let's
on the
be
record.
Clear.
It
You
sucks.
don't have sex in a car because you have other options.
Correct. I did a lot of things under the broken street lamp at the Denny's in Gurnee, Illinois in high school, and it's because I had nowhere else to go.
That's mildly better than a soybean field in Nowheresville, Ohio.
That also sounds better than a baseball field dugout.
Splinters in the ass.
Hey, after a long day of backyard wrestling, when you're using the batting cage as a steel cage, Hell in the Cell, where else are you gonna go?
As one does. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Gurnee, Illinois. I helped open a Nike store in the mall of up there while I was still in Chicago.
That sounds awful.
Oh boy.
It was
Yeah,
not great.
The Denny's outside of that mall is where I used to go with my high school FWB in their very large car and boink in the parking lot.
Heck yeah.
God, it sucks.
It's just
don't
like
have sex in cars, and don't
Yeah.
do it. Don't do it at restaurants. They want to go home. They know what you're doing.
they know what you're doing.
They're just like trying to put up the chairs. Like maybe they'll be done soon. Maybe they'll.
Oh my gosh. Maybe they'll be done soon. He can't last that long anyway, right?
Yeah. Right?
Anyway. I did say that there were two reasons why Pleasantville hit differently this time around. And the second reason for me was something that David says to Mr. Johnson. He says, you can't always like what you do. Sometimes you just got to do it because it's your job. And even if you don't like it, you just got to do it anyway. And like, obviously, David learns better, because in the end, when he's talking to his mom in the real world and she says, I'm 40, it's not supposed to be like this. He says, it's not supposed to be anything. Like, I haven't reached that point in my life yet where, I've accepted it's not supposed to be anything. But as the two of you know, the entertainment industry is going through a lot of stuff that is not great for the people in it. Journalists, and I speak about this just because I know the most about it compared to all the other stuff, but it's just like the state of entertainment journalism has not bounced back yet because of this like AI thing and so many other things. And it's just like having to pivot to something that is your job that you don't like, that you just got to do anyway, has been rough for me. So it's that's kind of why I kind of forgot to record an episode last month. But it's hard getting through it. But I also know that I'm not the only one going through it, because there is a lot of colleagues that BJ and I see on the regular who are having to deal with it. And unfortunately, we see more and more people have to deal with it each week, right?
Oh yeah, it's
So,
awful.
I mean,
yeah.
But yeah, just to get to that point where Dave, I keep wanting to call him Bud. But the point,
we will know who you mean.
Yeah, where David, accepts like it's not supposed to be anything. That's that sounds like it's a nice place to get to. So during this rewatch, it really stuck around in my brain, while I was doing my notes and things. So was there anything else about this rewatch for you, BJ, that really stood out?
The thing that always stands out to me, and it just evolves the more I watch it, is Jennifer's arc. Because
Mhm.
there's so many ways that women are taught how they're supposed to behave. And we're seeing a massive juxtaposition between Jennifer in the 90s versus her coming into, the world of Pleasantville and what is expected of her. I laugh every time she wears the bullet bra and she's like, oh my God, I could kill someone with these things. And they're like, they won't notice that. And I think that is so funny because this is also like, we're not super far away from the time period where we had these things like the Pall Mall Girl Watchers clubs, where men were literally printing out guides to like where the bustiest women in the city worked so you could go gawk at them. So it's like, nah, bud, they will notice. They do notice these things, but again, like it's this idealized version of this time period. But I love how her growth is abandoning all of the expectations that are put upon a woman of the 90s and being able to find peace
Mhm.
with just being with yourself and reading and challenging your mind and worrying about things that are not being forced to you as something you're supposed to be concerned with. Um, and I just think that it's really beautiful that she never loses who she is. She's still like a very sexual being. She's really mouthy. She's kind of an agent of chaos, but she also finds a lot of power in solitude and a lot of power in just doing something because she feels like it, not because she's expected to. And I think that her journey is one that I think for me as a woman is something that I'm constantly going through, is juggling the the expectations that I know are put upon me and being kinder to myself when I do start to fall into them and perpetuate, my own oppression, so to speak. But the easiest way for me to kind of undo all of that is just like stay home, stay inside, worry about myself. Don't worry about what's going on the internet. Don't worry about what's going on at like some event that I am not invited to. Like just don't give a crap about that. Just do what makes me happy because it makes me happy. And I think it's like a timeless thing.
Yeah, I agree so much. That's definitely something worth worth taking away from this movie, you know?
In light of that,
Yes.
what do you think of her decision at the end? What does it say that she wants to stay in Pleasantville?
What I've always read this as is not that she is, I'm going to permanently stay in Pleasantville and I'm going to be this little June Cleaver, Betty Homemaker type for the rest of my life. And that's what I'm doing. If that is what she wants to do, that's cool. That's also feminism. Do what you want. But what I think it means for her is she's
Mhm.
not ready yet. She still has more growing she needs to do. She still needs to continue this journey of figuring out who she is before she goes back to her own time period and is ready to tackle a much harsher, much more complicated world. She needs to build up a lot more of that confidence and that strength and that assuredness of who she is. And I think it's a really wise choice on her part to recognize that she's not ready to go back. She still has stuff she's got to do here.
I like that. I like that read.
Another thing that I really like about Jennifer's evolution in the movie is that she doesn't play it off like, Skip, I'm better than you because I'm staying in and reading. You know,
Mhm.
she's just like, no, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And there is a great feeling in that, you know, of just uh not giving a fuck and just doing the things that
Hmm.
you care about. And I think that's something that, you know, whether it's the 50s, the 90s, or now, is something that we all
Mhm.
should
I
take away
also
more
wonder
often.
if there's a read for Pleasantville had a lot more to learn from her still.
Oh, definitely. Like, and I think that it's,
Oh.
Yeah.
she's got this brother who is, sort of like the brainier of the two, so to speak. And so she's never had that chance to like kind of stand in the sun and be a leader. And I think she's coming to terms with enjoying that role for herself and knowing that like she's not going to be able to Reese Witherspoon cannot go back to the 90s and just magically be Tracy Flick from Election. Like she's got to do some work in Pleasantville and, you know, get flex those muscles a little bit and, you know, continue teaching those around her while continuing to like be more secure in herself and learn more things about herself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good read.
So I know I find any and all reason to bring up Frasier. But there are many movies and TV shows nowadays that people want to revive, do a sequel, do a prequel, do whatever. But do you think Pleasantville needs a sequel?
No.
Mm-mm. I don't think so at all. I think it needs to stay here because
Yeah,
like
leave
as
it
much as I
alone.
would love to revisit the throuple and see, you know, how things are going, what's their arrangement like? Have they pushed the beds together? What's going on? Like that would be fun and exciting, but also I don't want to know because it's none of my business what they're doing. And that's also a big part of this movie as well is like learning to mind your business. And like, yes, it's a small town, yes, you know everything about everybody, yes, you know everybody's families and you know their history and whatever, but a big part of growing up is also knowing that like you don't need to know what's going on in people's houses, leave them alone.
So we here at Time to Party have a question that we ask at the end of all of our reviews. So, friends, party people, would you say that Pleasantville is worth your time?
Yes, of course. It is absolutely worth your time. It was worth your time then. It is worth your time now. It is worth your time forever.
Yeah. Absolutely, it was a million% worth my time. I had a great time watching it. I really enjoyed every little bit of it, even when I thought that you had tricked me into watching just a different version of Click.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Because the last time we watched the movie where the time travel device was a remote, you were not too happy about it.
I did not appreciate
You don't like watching Adam Sandler dying in the rain? That doesn't do it for you?
That part was actually kind of okay. Mostly because Adam Sandler was dying. My first note is magic remote control. Is this a trope now? But I still had a great time. I think it's absolutely worth your time.
I feel like if I
click drama.
I feel like if I can ever get a time travel movie off the ground and shot or something, I'm gonna have to use a magic remote just for Ansel's benefit.
Yep, there you go. For me.
Oh my gosh! And for me, yes, 100%. You know, even though this viewing did get a little bit more emotional for me than my last viewings, 100% worth your time, especially, you know, white people. Watch this movie.
Learn something.
Yeah.
Please, for the love of God.
Get some metaphor on you.
Yes. Oh man, that was great. That was a great chat. I love talking about movies with cool people. Isn't it the best?
It's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
What a party. Yeah. Oh man. Well, party people, you can find us on the internet. I'm at bsilverio20 on Instagram and Twitter and Letterboxd and Blue Sky and, you know, all that stuff.
I am on all forms of social media at BJ Colangelo, and my podcast, This Ends at Prom, is at This Ends at Prom.
I am at Indecisionist on all of the meta properties and the other social medias that I'm likely to be found on, except for Twitter, where I am the ghost of me is hanging around as the Indecisionist. You can also find the gaming event that I run every month at ttrpgpickupcon.com.
Friends, this has been a great discussion about a great movie. I think the only word to describe it is that it's been real keen, real peachy keen.
I thought you were going to say pleasant.
Jelly
but yeah.
bean. I was gonna, but yes, be pleasant to each other. No. But also, yeah, kind of.
Sock hop on, dudes.
Do we have a 1950s remix of the theme song?
Quick, call your cousin.
Oh my God, right? Oh, well, come back and join us next week as we get into some edutainment where, we're not done teaching you things using Pleasantville. So while we all look forward to that, be excellent to each other.
And party on, dudes.
Excellent.
Had to do it.
Had to.
Had to.
It's a thing now.
Can we get the rights to that song, Ansel?